Today on Yeti at Large, wheel hub assembly. The kids named this truck Toothless after I smashed the bumper hitting a pole at the baseball field, and the truck drove around for months without a replacement bumper trying to find one that was a good deal. Kind of looks like the dragon from How to Train Your Dragon. So that's how the truck got its name Toothless. It's been over 3 decades since I was broke down on the side of the road because I am so meticulous with routine maintenance. Yet, a couple weeks ago, the front wheel bearing went bad and I had to limp it to a stop on Interstate 40. Been a long time since I'd called a tow truck driver for myself, but being in public safety all those years, I knew all these tow truck drivers, and so when he showed up 4.5 hours later, it was really nice to see a familiar face helping me out on the side of the road. Got to be careful on the highways. Dangerous place. I won't go over great details of the breakdown. Removing these hubs is not the most difficult. That assembly screw that holds the rotor onto the hub, they always freeze and it tears up my Torx drivers trying to get them out. 36. I did have a 36 millimeter socket from a previous project, and that's what it takes to remove that axle bolt holding the hub assembly to the axle. This was my big concern, that there was damage in there to the splines, to the hub, to the axle, and that I'd have to dig further into the front end to repair this. Since I'm not necessarily recycling this hub, I was okay using a screwdriver to try to hold the hub in place to break the torque on that bolt. Long story short, I wasn't able to do that without applying a little bit of heat, and you'll see me with the torch in a minute. I like that section of plumber's pipe because it's got plastic caps on either end that holds the socket and allows me to use it like a breaker bar. I always buy the yellow MAP, M-A-P gas, because it burns quite a bit hotter and allows you to heat up threads and break that seal. Sometimes I'll heat it and then quickly cool it to break the seal, but as you see, that worked pretty well right there. I am going to harvest those studs out of that hub flange for roadside emergencies, and I'll put those in my toolkit just in case. See too many cars driving around with broken wheel studs. So dangerous. This was good news here when the bolt came off and I realized that none of the threads or the splines had been damaged. However, I've still got to get back in a very tight space to remove the 3 bolts holding the assembly on, and it's almost impossible to film that and work on it simultaneously, so I won't bore you with it. If you're going to attempt this type of repair on your own, make sure you got a good manual and a good guide. I'll also point out that I have 12-ton truck jacks on the frame on either side of this, plus I put in a 4x12 block of wood under the cross member to just work as a safety mechanism. Alrighty. Dust shield, brake shield. It's got a crack in it. It's just a basic sheet metal part. It's not structural. I believe it's just designed to protect objects from the brake rotors from the backside. This crack here doesn't seem to be the end of the world. I believe I can weld this up and then reinstall this same piece and reuse this. So that's a win. My number 27 Torx got destroyed trying to take that bolt out. However, the bolt that holds the disc rotor on is just for construction purposes, assembly purposes, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. My rotor, while it's got a little ring on it, you can see, I don't believe it is damaged to the point where I can't use it anymore. These are fleet rotors, so they're unbearably thick. I believe I can dress this up with a little lightweight milling operation. I'll show you that in a minute. So we're going to salvage these fleet rotors. Here are the parts that I picked up off the ground. You can see those are the roller pins from the bearing, what's left of the bearing. Here is our old wheel hub assembly. This is the condition I found it in, completely destroyed, and I didn't drive on it that far. I had to get off down from freeway speeds and exit the freeway, and then there was unloading it from my buddy's tow truck, and and bringing it into the driveway, so I had to drive on it just a little bit. You can see the heat damage on the outside, but none on the inside. This part is trash. I'm going to hang on to it though, because I'm going to salvage these studs and save them in the toolbox for emergencies. There's what's left of that rotor screw that holds the brake rotor on. Here's what's left of the actual hub portion of this flange, and you can see it's totally destroyed. Here's the sensor for the StabiliTrak traction control and ABS. Shame on me. That thing tripped and I thought it was just a sensor issue. If I had paid more respect to it earlier, I wasn't going to save this part, but I certainly wouldn't have been that damaged. So, thank God it stayed on the truck. It was the axle bolt and the axle bolt washer that held this piece on. And here is my replacement part. This is a Napa Fleet quality assembly. These are fairly new to Napa. I didn't get it just because there's a public safety vehicle on the front there. I got it because it was actually a pretty good deal. These are on special while they're introducing them, but this is a complete package. And the folks at my local Napa treat me really well. I'm very impressed with the quality of the seals, the milling on the spline gear. I know you can't see that. I like the bright orange cord for the ABS traction control and StabiliTrak. It's got the right amount of drag resistance on the wheel bearing. These are high quality steel studs. This looks like a quality part. And again, I don't know if you can see the flanges for the axle in there. They look to be a quality mill. So we're going to get to work on installing this, and hopefully it gets toothless back on the road. But first I'm going to start by cleaning up that rotor and welding up this dust shield. Now, one detail I want to share for the home aspiring mechanic. These are not the highest quality bolts. The replacement bolts were $40 from Napa, so I'm going to try to recycle these. I can't find any evidence in the book where this is what's known as a TOY, torque to yield, meaning you stretch these things and it yields the final length under torque, but they can't be recycled. A lot of import engines and suspension components use these kind of bolts. I don't see where they're at. I do see red on here, which indicates to me that they've had some sort of a Loctite thread sealing material on them. I didn't know GM specified that, so it makes me wonder if someone's already been into this once. Now, this collar right here slips into the swing arm assembly, and that's how it holds. And boy, is it real bare to get out of there. The trick that I use to do that, and when I'm working on heavy-duty components, I always use what's known as a 6-sided socket. You see how there's basically 6 sides in there. And if I could show you a 12-sided socket, you're going to tear up these 12-sided sockets easy because they're not designed to handle as much load as a 6-sided socket would. This is a 15 millimeter deep well. I didn't have a 15 millimeter half-inch drive. This is only 3/8. I wished I had a 15 short. That would be the perfect one, but I don't. I didn't buy one when I was at the shop. But when you got to get these out, the trick is I don't take out a bolt and remove the whole bolt and then start on the next one. I loosen each and every one of these before I even try to remove the whole part, just to ensure they're all going to move. And once I get them backed out and I can see about 1/4 of an inch to 1/3 of an inch of relief there, I'll take this socket and I'll place it back over the top of it. And then I will take an extension that I have no intention of using. This isn't it because it's a universal, but I'll put an extension in there, and then that will allow me to use a ball peen hammer to tap it on the backside and move this part so it comes loose. Once this part is free and it's loose from its fitting, then I can go ahead and take these the rest of the way off and remove them. But because they have this built-in washer, you seat that socket on there and you're driving on the washer, not destroying the bolt. And you really don't want to hit them too hard because you can clean these threads out if you're really wailing on it. If it's not going to move after you're wailing on it, things like heat and cold are going to be what you really want to try from there. And so this is trash, obviously. One of the things I do like to do is just test fit. Okay, that one threads beautifully. These other two, that one threads beautifully. This one's going to be a bit stubborn, but I believe once I'm in and I'm ready to go. So when I install this, I'm going to make sure to rotate this to put this in the easiest to reach position, so I'm not really struggling to get the socket on there where I'm limited on space. And I inspected these threads before I left the store with this part. I always open my parts and get a real good look before I go anywhere, since I live 20 plus miles outside of town. So I took the glazing off the pad with mechanical sander. There's no deep gouges, and the mills are spot on for a very healthy fresh rotor. I got one little nick in it right there, but I think all this needed was to just be lightly freshened up, and we should be good. And they're straight as can be, even though they're not on my little wheel here perfectly straight. If they had had any significant damage or gouging, I would have taken them in to have them turned. All right, so we finished disassembly, and we got some good news. We got a good clean face here. There looks like there's no damage on the axle shaft. I've inspected all of the splines, and they all look good. The CV boot looks okay, even though it might have a tiny little tear in it, and these threads are good. I'm going to recycle this nut and that washer, and I don't see any issues here. I should be able to reinstall this piece fairly simply. You don't get lucky and just happen to have a 36 millimeter socket in your kit. But I bought this years ago for one application, and it turns out it works for a second. And I'm not trying to torque this yet. I'm just trying to make sure that I didn't pull the axle out. Alrighty, this blizzard has sure got in the way of finishing this repair. And in the spirit of Ken Mattingly and Jim Lovell, I didn't want to reassemble this without reminding myself it needed to be torqued properly. Here at Yeti at Large, we follow the teachings of the prophet James, Jesse James. Anytime you're wrenching on something, you want to perform what we kind of call nutting and bolting it. You need to go through a couple of times and check the torque, the pattern, everything. Don't take anything for granted. Assume something's come loose, and you just need to find it. It's kind of like a pre-flight ritual. Now, what's kind of harsh is as soon as I'm done with this repair, here's where I'm test driving it. And it might look kind of flat on the camera, but this is almost 2 feet of snow. Might seem like overkill, but I wear ear protection anytime I'm running any kind of equipment, including my 30-year-old super loud compressor. Well, that's it. There's no wobble in the hub anymore. There's a good amount of drag. The brakes are going to have to reset themselves a little bit. I freshened up the rotors just to make sure we get good contact. I've got the sensor routed. I've checked my spacings on everything, and I've triple checked the torques on this. Let's get these lug nuts set up, and let's go for the roughest test drive you've ever had. 2 feet of snow. So at this point, I've triple checked everything, and I'm about to put the truck back on the ground. You'll see my 12-ton jack stands are out of there, and I've taken that piece of safety wood and balanced it between the two cross members to even the load out, lifting the truck. Now, I just didn't blast out of the garage. I took time and confirmed the four-wheel drive was working forwards and backwards, that the StabiliTrak and the traction control sensors appeared to be reading properly. Now, my driveway was plowed, but after that, the road that I'm on now hadn't seen a plow in almost 18 inches of snowfall. So this was kind of sketchy. I got the truck in 4 low, and in doing so, I manually deactivated the StabiliTrak and the traction control. That's done by pushing the button once quickly and then pushing it a second time and holding it for up to 12 seconds. That gives you power on demand and allows you to make more decisions. You can see here that I'm going uphill in pretty deep snow and struggling to stay on the road a little bit. Maybe I was a little heavy on the throttle because I was stressed out. But the truck made it all the way around the lap, and we went all the way around the neighborhood. To finish this test drive,
we're going to do the patented hook and look.
I wanted to back all the way into the neighborhood, which means down my road and down my driveway. And I only ran the snowblower to get wide enough for the actual truck, so I really had to thread the needle here.
Thread the needle, come on. There you go, come on, Toothless.
Watch as I back up in the camera that I installed on the tailgate from a Pioneer stereo system.
Holy smokes. Back to the hook and look, because now I'm going this way.
Home sweet home, back in the garage, safe and sound.
Woo! Thank you for tuning in to Yeti at Large. Really grateful you're here. Please like, subscribe, share this with a friend, and leave a comment.